Brave New World. Pirate. As a forward note, readers should of course be aware that Miguel is a man of the 17th century. He spoke with the attitudes of his time in relation to indigenous peoples, women, and other European nations. We have translated his journal into contemporary English, but have tried to keep something of the formality of the style of his early modern Spanish.
My name is Miguel Cortez Garcia, and I am a simple man. I want nothing more than sunshine, wine, and a decent paella with proper-sized prawns, not those sad creatures being offered up in the market last Saturday. However, as I was complaining, my beloved wife Enriqueta reminded me that we are indeed fortunate that unsatisfactory prawns are the greatest of our worries. Indeed, recalling our hardships last year, I could not help but agree. Having returned to my Andalusian estates, never to venture again across the ocean, I have decided to record for posterity the nightmare which my family lived through. I hope that it will be entertaining, and I pray, dear reader, that you will never encounter the like during your years on earth. Not having expected to inherit the estates which have now come into my possession, following the sad and early demise of my poor uncle Pepe, may God rest his soul, I decided to seek my fortune in the New World. Like many adventures before and since, however, I was unlucky in crossing the fearsome Atlantic. Even though our ship was as fine and strong as any afloat, we found ourselves caught up in a violent storm, and as helpless as a leaf in puddle, whipped about by a bored child with a stick. Our captain was a skillful mariner from my native Cadiz, but nothing which he or the crew did could save us. We ran aground in the dead of night, and the only mercy was that we were in fairly shallow water. The Holy Virgin must have been watching over us, because not a single soul was lost. We were wet, shivering, and utterly terrified, but everyone made it ashore. Even the dogs and goats which we had on board came out alive. I shiver now to remember the terrible hours of darkness. We managed to light some fires and did our best to stay warm with the blankets we could salvage. Many of them sodden. The little ones were crying, and one of the dogs kept howling in sympathy. We tried to comfort one another with the idea that there might be civilized people in this country would help us, although the captain said that he did not think it probable from the charts. Rodrigo, a fellow traveler from my own southern Spain, said that he had heard of cannibals on islands like this, who tear into human flesh as readily as we devour bread. His mother-in-law then said that if there were cannibals, she hoped that the gentlemen would do the decent thing and offer themselves to be roasted in place of the ladies and infants. After that, Rodrigo kept pretty quiet, although he did later whisper that any self-respecting cannibal would naturally want the larger, fattier joints of meat, and it wasn't his fault if his mother-in-law fell into that category. When dawn finally broke, we were all elated to have survived the ordeal of the night, but our joy was short-lived. To our surprise and horror, we heard a voice speaking English. When I say speaking, it was more of a shriek, if I'm honest. Our captain, who knew that language better than anyone else, blushed and refused to translate exactly what was said. He explained, however, that it meant more or less, "Who are you?" followed by something like, "Whoever you are, you can go away." When the person speaking came into view, I was completely shocked and utterly bewildered. I had never witnessed anything quite like it before. It was apparent that the figure was female, but she was dressed in a man's shirt and breeches, but with a fine sash, flashing jewelry of a woman, and brightly painted cheeks. This was my first encounter with a woman. I cannot use the word lady of the English pirate crew. A ship of these savage criminals had been washed up onto the same shore by the storm. Molly shout brought others out, like insects crawling from under a rock. Two in particularly made a great impression on me. One was their captain, a skinny, mincing wretch answering to the name of Walter, of all things. At least the cursed Raleigh was a competent bandit. We were soon to discover that this lot were good for more or less nothing when it came to trying to build shelters and manage our immediate survival. When he saw, and I suppose heard, a large company of Spaniards, he looked around in blind panic, as if hoping to find a palm tree or rock to hide behind, assuming that by some miracle we would overlook having spotted him. If you think that I am insulting his intelligence, you have not met the gentleman in question. And Walter, I own, did at least try to be a gentleman, in all honesty. As time passed and relations eased, I remember him playing with some of our children, and I think lacked the viciousness to make his living as a pirate king. If a man is to fail at anything, failing at being ruthless is perhaps a good thing to fail at. But of course, at this first meeting, we didn't know that he was basically harmless. We were terrified, and Doña Isabella was yelling for somebody to shoot them. It was clear that there were more of us than them. Doña Isabella is a formidable lady in her 60s, who is accustomed to being obeyed, having spent her lifetime terrifying her family's servants and more or less everyone in her district. Fortunately, we did not have pistols easily to hand, and in any case, I doubt that we would have found dry powder. In Doña Isabella's world, if she wants something, it must happen, regardless of anyone's excuses. But she cannot expect to bend the laws of nature to her will. When we failed to fire muskets, which we didn't have, she began berating us for being feeble cowards, which, as you can imagine, did not go down well. And several men, including myself, began to loudly defend our honor. At this point, a particularly specimen of piratehood made his presence felt. I late learned two things. One, that his name was Stinking Jack. And two, that God knows how, but he would certainly have saved alcohol from the ship sooner than his own mother. He was as usually drunk at this point. He staggered in front of us, shouted something which I'm sure was obscene, and dropped his trousers to show the assembled Spaniards his filthy backside. We were almost affronted and would then gladly have shot him if we had had the means. Yet, José called for calm. José is a fisherman, but extremely wise. And as my mother always used to tell me, St. Peter himself was a fisherman. He called to us that if we continued to fight with each other and with these English pirates, we would waste a day which we could profitably spend seeking help, or failing that shelter. So that is how our strange society began. Pitched up by the same tide, a ship of respectable subjects of His Majesty the King of Spain and a horde of English pirates were forced to work for the common good. I shall write more of my adventures in due course, but I can smell the scent of dinner in the air, so we'll break off now.